Well, we've got another January horror movie on our hands. What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Welcome back into JC's Movies, where you can see all kinds of movie reviews and TV show news as well. If you're into that kind of thing, be sure to hit the subscribe button here, especially if you're into horror, comedy, superhero. Those are kind of my favorite genres. So if they're up your alley, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button while you're in here. We're going to get into a spoiler review of Wolfman. And yeah, I said in the cold open there, another 2025 January horror movie on our hands because we know in the past, January is kind of where horror movies go to die, right? That's where a lot of the schlock, a lot of the shit goes, is up there in January. Every now and then there's an exception, and we were hoping that maybe Wolfman would be the exception. The initial reactions were good, but then when it started to release to a wider audience, it started to seem like more of the same. And the thing that I hate the most about it is Blumhouse really struggling as of late. I can't think of the last Blumhouse movie that I personally really enjoyed a lot after they had such a hot start in the horror genre when they first came out of the gates back in the day, did Blumhouse. And this also, of course, was the team up with, James Wan and Blumhouse, Leigh Whannell directing, so I had some high hopes for that. And there were some decent parts of the direction, I thought, and really just kind of get into my initial thoughts before we talk. Well, the way we're going to do these reviews moving forward here in 2025 on the channel is I'm going to talk about the pros, the cons, and then kind of the mix, which I'm calling neither here nor there. And then I'll give my overall rating at the end. But I do want to give you guys a reminder, this will be a spoiler review. So if you haven't seen Wolfman yet, back out now. Or if you just don't give a shit about spoilers, that's cool. Hang out here, we'll talk about it. But there were some cool moments of the direction, I thought, from Leigh Whannell. Actually, that was probably one of the more bright spots for me in the movie. But overall, it started off a little slow for, a little bit, the first 10, 15 minutes or so, it was a little bit slow. But then once it got rolling there, I was like, okay, I actually might like this, more than most people did, I feel like. And then you hit that second act. And then once you transition into that back half of that second act into the third act of the movie, everything just fucking fell apart for me personally. That's just the best way I can describe it. And then you end up with kind of where you thought you'd end up with a January horror movie with typical Blumhouse schlock and all of that. So that's just kind of my initial thoughts, just kind of paint an overall picture before I dive more into the spoilers here when we talk pros, cons, and neither here nor there. Let's talk the pros first. Let's get a little positivity in here in this Wolfman review. All right, so let's talk about my pros from the movie that I thought were good things for me that I enjoyed. Like I said, directed by Leigh Whannell. He wrote it along with Corbett Tuck. You get Julia Garner starring, Leigh Whannell and Christopher Abbott, of course, playing the titular character there, which I think originally wasn't this supposed to be Ryan Gosling or somebody like that, which I think maybe would that have changed the feelings about it? It could have. Not that there were bad performances in this. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but some of the pros. For me, the cool camera work, especially early when you first find out he's been scratched by the wolf and he's kind of in the doorway and the camera does like a Dutch angle as he's kind of leaning over about to fall, and then as he rises back up the camera straightens back up. That was a pretty cool shot. And then you get some more of that when he's going through the transition scene, which unfortunately was leaked. Talking more about that in a second. It wasn't even leaked, it was shared by Universal Blumhouse anyways. But I thought that the camera work when he was going through the transition, how the camera would, utilize Dutch angles, utilize camera tilts to really kind of give you this POV of the werewolf character in a lot of ways, which I thought that was one of the most positive things for me. One of the highest things in the pros here was not only that camera work, but also there's moments when you do get the POV of the werewolf. As much as I didn't like this take on a werewolf story, this take on a Wolfman story overall, which we'll talk more about in the con section, one of the pros of the way that they did decide to do this was they do this cool thing where when he's kind of first getting sick, as they're calling it, which we know, of course, he's about to, of course, become the werewolf, become the Wolfman or whatever, right? And as that's happening, you're seeing him talk to his wife, and she's sitting there, having a normal conversation, and it's shot regularly, like as you would expect it to be. And then they do this thing where the camera kind of spins and comes around, pans around to where it's looking at her, and as it pans around, you see everything changing to where this is showing you this is actually how he's seeing it. This is his POV, what he's becoming as the Wolfman. You see he can't, really understand what they're saying to him. Everything looks different, the like color blindness going on, but some really cool ideas there. But of course, the downside of that was kind of the effects that were involved when they did that. So at some points didn't really work out. And then I thought in the third act, overall, as bad as it was for me, there was the one part that I did enjoy was the werewolf fight. I thought that was a pretty cool touch to have those two wolfmen, going at it in the third act. Wish it had been a little bit longer, but you did get that cool touch in the third act. You do get that little set piece. So those are my pros, guys. Not a long list, I know. So it kind of probably gives some things away about my overall rating and how I'm feeling about this one. But those are the pros. Let's go with the neither here nor there section now, kind of the things that I was mixed on. And one of those goes back to the performances that I was talking about, where I thought it would have been maybe beneficial to have, Ryan Gosling or someone like that in this lead role. Because I thought Christopher Abbott as Blake, not a bad performance. I don't think there were really any bad performances by everyone that we kind of saw involved here. Julia Garner, Sam Yeager, Matilda Firth as the daughter Ginger, Ben Pendergrass, Zach Chandler, Rob McBride, Milo Cawthorn, Leigh Whannell, to kind of go through the cast there. Very small cast. It's very much kind of a contained story. You're off the beaten path. I think it's in Oregon, I believe is what they said, kind of way out in the sticks, right there, almost off the grid type life that his dad, I think it was his dad or was it his uncle, whoever's house he was inheriting. I don't know. That they didn't do the best job conveying the story, in my opinion, or maybe I just lacked interest there early on, so I missed some things. That's, also kind of shows how I was feeling about the movie. But nonetheless, here in the mix section, I think that what you got here from the acting overall was not really bad performances from anyone, in my opinion, but I thought it just lacked star power. There was no one that really kept you glued to the screen that, drew you in my opinion. It was fine. That's how I would describe the acting in the movie. It was fine. It wasn't bad at all. That's why it's neither here nor there. And then the score, man. I think when you have a horror movie, you want to notice the score, and the score in this movie was barely noticeable and completely unremarkable, very not memorable. It doesn't come away saying, "Oh man, you remember that piece of music that kicked in when the Wolfman was chasing them?" Or I don't even hardly remember any of the music from this movie. It was barely noticeable, and score is a big part for me that plays a giant part in horror. You got to have that good score. You got to have that Halloween theme, that Friday the 13th theme. Even Scream has great needle drops to go along with the score. So maybe if you're not gonna have a good score, throw some nice needle drops in there, give us a nice soundtrack. But the music lackluster for me. So it gets here in the mixed, just because it's not even that it was bad, it's just that it was barely noticeable. And then decent gore, I thought. At times when they decided to go there, wish they would have went there more. That's why it's in the mix section. And then the CGI, there were times where it looked okay. Some of the effects, the prosthetics were good. But as I mentioned, like the shots where they showed kind of the werewolf's POV and how he's seeing things and everything, the CGI looked really shitty. It almost reminded me of like The Flash, which is a movie that I like, but we all can agree some of the worst, shittiest CGI we've gotten in recent years. So that's what I had there in the neither here nor there section. Now let's get to the cons, which unfortunately for this movie, my longest list here was the cons. Number one, the design of the werewolf. Did not like the way they went with this, wolfman creature design. It just, God, it was, man, at one point when he's first transitioned, he's looking at himself in the mirror and he just looked like fucking Shaggy from Scooby-Doo if he was on meth. Like, I don't know. It doesn't look like a wolfman to me. It's like you went half measure. Don't go half measure, go full measure, man. If you're going to make this movie and, it's going to have a lot of aspects that people don't like and everything as we're hearing coming out now, you could have at least had a badass werewolf design and badass creature designs for these werewolves. I mean, you got two werewolves fighting and it just kind of looks like two dudes fighting. And then later in the movie, he just looks like a bald, I don't know what. It doesn't even... I just wasn't a fan of the creature design, and I know they're going for like a different take, and that's the other thing that goes in the cons for me is just the take on the story is a different kind of Wolfman movie, almost kind of reminiscent of like the Fly vibes with Jeff Goldblum, or Dracula, or Frankenstein's monster, where it's almost they tried to make him like this sympathetic character because where they tie it into just this family dynamic, and so then they try and have this heartwarming ending, and it's just not really what I was wanting and expecting for a Wolfman movie personally. I want to see someone go transition into the Wolfman, and then it turns into almost, a creature feature slasher from there. That's just kind of my take on it, but I understand they were trying to do something different, do it their own way, but I think they kind of missed the mark on it because, if you're going to have that type of story, I think you need to have more capable actors to really sell and draw the audience in, like I talked about earlier. And with lacking that star power, that story didn't hit home for me. It wasn't putting me in my feels at any point in the movie. It was just kind of dull, personally. That's That's the way I felt about it. Didn't like the take on the werewolf story, the take on the Wolfman story. And to me, typical Universal Blumhouse revealing too much ahead of the time before the movie's released. They've done this time and time again for all the movies, and I think it's because Blumhouse knows here lately they've been putting out a lot of shit, so they need to do something to draw people into the theater. So, hey, we'll give you pretty much the whole movie here. Here's a summary of it in our trailer. Or if they don't do that, here's the werewolf transformation scene. Look how cool this is. It's one of the only cool parts of the movie, but we're going to show it to you beforehand. Why? It's because as soon as that scene hit, when I'm watching the movie, I'm like, well, know this, already seen this shit. It just takes it away so much. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? I don't understand that, but it's typical, Universal / Blumhouse move to do that. Unfortunately, they've been releasing a lot of shit ahead of time and time again, and they do it again here. And I think it hurt the movie as well, giving that away beforehand. As many people as you drew into the theater, the same amount of people that were in the theater found the movie boring because that was one of the only, badass parts, and you revealed it already. Never really felt like there were any stakes in the movie, man. It really went along. I think, I hate to say this because I do like Leigh Whannell and I like James Wan, but you look at the Conjuring universe, which I'm not a fan of, because that's part of the problem there is there's never any stakes. It's just someone popping out, scaring somebody, and going on about their day. There's really never any death. You never felt like any of these characters were in any danger in this movie except for titular Wolfman and, of course, the side characters that come in, and you're just like, well, you're there to create a body count so we can have some form of gore in what's supposed to be a horror movie, some form of kills in what's supposed to be a horror movie. And so never felt like there were any stakes. So huge con there for me. And then, like I said, maybe I was enjoying it for the first couple acts, but the third act really dropped it down in the unfulfilling climax that was super predictable, where they've been setting up this relationship between him and his daughter throughout the movie. You knew they were going to have some type of what they tried to have a heartwarming moment where, he looks at her and conveys some message without even speaking to her. I guess fucking telepathically, he can speak to his daughter now and tells the mom to shoot him, and she shoots him, and blah, blah, the end of the movie. Wow. What a fucking picture, guys. And then that just, if I didn't have a bad enough rating, that ending dropped it down for me a lot there. Just felt to me like what we've been getting lately from Blumhouse, unfortunately, and predictable ending. And so I think that really dropped the movie down. You maybe have had something if you'd have went a certain way in the first, 30, 45 minutes of this movie, but the back half of it dropped it and didn't deliver anything on it for me for, gores, kills, horror movies, scares. Was never scared at any point, never felt any stakes. There was no tension. And then, of course, the story that they were trying to deliver emotionally didn't hit me at all emotionally. So for me, this is painfully average, guys. And that's why I said at the opening, another typical January horror movie. And that ending dropped it down to me to be just barely average. I'm going to give this a 5.0. And I think I'm being a little bit generous, guys. I really do. I think I'm being generous, giving it a 5 out of 10. But that's what I'm going here. That's my rating for Wolfman. 5 out of 10. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you had a chance to check out Wolfman, and let me know what other movies you're looking forward to in 2025. More reviews coming up throughout the year here on the channel on JC's Movies. So stay tuned in here by hitting the subscribe button, especially if you're a fan of horror movies like this one. Hit the thumbs up button before you head out. I really appreciate that, just like I appreciate you tuning into this video, and I will catch you on the next one.